Yes, started.
Yeah, thank you. So hi everyone. So this is the last webinar on this hackathon. It's actually the last step we had, right? It's how to submit the app on the Autodesk App Store. So on this webinar, we'll be covering some topics on how you can make this submission process. It's focused on the process itself. It's not actually focused on the technical part, but we do have some recommendations as well. And well, my name is Augusto Gonçalves. I presented also the data management webinar last week, and yeah. So on this last part, let's go in some details on how you can do the last piece of your submission. As always, if you have any question, just raise your hand or type the question on the panel, on the webinar panel. Sorry about that. And you can ask questions anytime, and I will try to stop once in a while and take the questions you may have. This webinar, I keep moving. So today, I have some agenda. That's what we're going to talk about. We have some steps before publishing, the actual submitting steps, and some ideas on how you can handle after that when someone buys your app, or when you have new releases of your app, right? So everything should be covered here. So let's get started with the requirements. What we need to make our app live. Well, we do have a page where we can show all the requirements we have for the store. You should go to autodesk.com/develop-apps. So it's just a quick summary before we go on that link. Of course, your application must be relevant to BIM 360. It doesn't make sense to make an application that is completely out of scope, of course. The application must be ready to use. Do not delay the usage of the application. So let's say the user will come to your application, buy your app, or get a free app, trial, whatever. And they have to wait like 2 or 3 days for you to authorize the usage. So the app should be ready to use. Don't hold on late authorization process or releasing the usage, right? And do not expose user data in public. So let's say you have the application that will just create, put that on a public link, etc. That's not something that we are encouraging to use. So let me take a visit to this link. I have a QR code. If you want to scan this code with your phone, you can go to this address as well. But let me show you that on the page. And actually not this one. When you click on the link, it's going to redirect you to this page. The URL is a bit different, but it's the same one. So here we have all the requirements to publish any type of application. So let's say you have an application for AutoCAD, Revit, Inventor, etc. And here at the bottom, you have the BIM 360 requirements. So as I mentioned, some of the requirements are to be relevant, compatible with BIM 360 docs or BIM 360 team, ready to run, some other, and here we have some guidelines as well. So let me go back to the presentation. So about the guidelines, your application must show some provision steps. That's required when you have an application that will, in order for application to show BIM 360 docs folder, you need to show some provisioning steps. So as of now, we need the BIM 360 docs account admin to approve your application. So let me show how this step works. So there is a blog post on this topic. So this is the link I'm showing on the PowerPoint, showing how you can implement that and some description. But let's show this in action. So I have here an application. On this application is an application to transfer files from BIM 360 to OneDrive and vice versa. And if I log in on this site, on this application with my Autodesk account right here, as I'm already logged in with my Autodesk account, we'll just redirect. So just wait for it. So it's going to show my my files, and it's pop up in this window. So thanks for using my application to view your BIM 360 docs file. your application on this application, please authorize my Forge client ID with a BIM 360 account. So this is a step that we need today, and you need to provide the user of your application your Forge client ID, not the secret, but the ID, and the application name. That's right. So if you have a window like this, that should be enough. Be sure to show some steps. So when you click here, you can see the steps to make this work. Everything to make this work is available on that blog post, including the images and the HTML code to make this pop up. So basically, when the user comes to your application,
hello. Just
yes.
Yeah, this is Mikako. I just wanted to let you know that the image is coming slightly later. So
okay,
you may want to go slowly. Yeah, that would be helpful. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. So let's continue here. So when you have your application, you show those steps and ask the user to provision, right? We talked about that over the week. So over all these webinars we had over the last week. So basically, the account admin on BIM 360 needs to go to Settings, Apps and Integration, then click on Add Integration, and if I scroll down, there is a space for the BIM 360 Docs account admin to type the Forge client ID and the app name of the application, right? So those are the steps the user, in this case the BIM 360 Docs account admin, needs to do. So the requirement for now is that your application will have such a screen showing those steps and showing the information the user needs to do this, right? So in this case, I need to show my Forge client ID and my Forge client ID and the application name. So in this case, I have those two here. Okay, so most of this code is available on that blog post I mentioned. So that's the blog post. Here's a video showing how it works, and here are the provisioning that page model. It's using Bootstrap, but here's the HTML to make that work, right? In the images, if you want to just copy the images, you don't have to create the images yourself. So again, if you have questions about these provisioning steps, well, that's a good point to raise your hand or place your question on the questions panel. So that will be interesting. So, so those are the requirements. So relevant, ready to use, do not expose data in public, must show the provision steps as a way to help the user. We are asking the developers to show those steps in a consistent way, so the user will be expecting that pop-up to show sometime and showing how to provision and showing the Forge client ID. Additionally, its requirement is to, ideally, you should use three-legged authentication on your application, meaning you're going to ask your user to type his Autodesk password and login and password. So why is that? Because if your application is using three-legged authentication, your application cannot access information that the user cannot access, right? So in a three-legged environment, everything that your application can see is the same information that the user can see. So there is no data leak on your application, right? When you have a two-legged authentication on BIM 360, you can perform like, we should say like a God's permissions, right? So you can do anything. So it's possible that your application will leak some data between one user to the other, and you don't really have a very good good way to control that. So it's better if your application is using three-legged, because that's the safest way for you to handle. Preferably, if you have to access files, use three-legged. If you need to do something that is like accessing, creating projects, or something that really requires two-legged, then go for it. But avoid using two-legged to access files. I know I'm repeating myself, but that's very important, right? Don't use two-legged to access the files, because you are going to show data that the user don't have access to. And if you must use two-legged, use the X user ID header on the request. That way you can act as the user with the respective user ID. So that way you're not exposing data from one user to the other. More important to that is when you have two-legged and you are just accessing the data, you may come to a scenario where you are accessing information from one company and exposing that to users from a different company. So that's even worse, right? So make sure you have a very good separation of environment to not show one user data to a different user. If you're always acting with three-legged, that's not a problem because the three-legged environment will take care of that. So I have a question here, let me check. So let me read the question. So three-legged with desktop application requires set up a local server to listen to the token. This can be created through a Windows installer, Wix, for instance. According to my experience with Autodesk apps, you usually create the installer. Can you provide some custom actions, or should I create the installer? Okay, so if you have a desktop application, that means that you need to deploy something to the user. That does require some MSI to install, and the App Store will provide that for you. So why is that? Because the App Store wants to keep a consistent experience. So if your application is using a EXE or a DLL or any type of binary that you need to deploy to the client, just submit those binaries to the App Store team along with the help file, documentation, package contents, description. And with all that information, the App Store team can create the installer for you. And once the user selects the application on the App Store and downloads the application, that will go with the MSI that we install. And we also have a consistent experience to install and uninstall the apps, right? So in that case, you are following the steps to deploy a client-side application. Another benefit of that approach of using our installer is that in the future, if you have a new version, you can just submit a new version, and we are going to create a new installer for you. And everyone with the previous version will get a notification and download the new version with the Autodesk application manager. So that application will run on the desktop environment, on Windows environment, right? So that's a very interesting question. So let me come back to my website here. So I was showing some specific information for AutoCAD, Revit, etc. But part of that information will be applicable for BIM 360 as well if you have a desktop application. So, well, that's something that we have to learn with you if you have that type of application. So just submit as a desktop application compatible with Windows or Mac OS, etc. And we're going to work with you on that environment. But you can submit your application as a DLL. The second part was around three-legged on that environment. Yes, you need a server in the middle to do the authentication, because that's the point, right? If you have a desktop application and that needs to authenticate with Autodesk, at some point that authentication requires a forged client ID and secret. If you send that forged client ID and secret to the client eventually will have access to it because it's not safe, right? So the best way is to keep a server in the middle where you can host your forged client ID and secret, and that server will do the authentication. You may think that the next step will be to send a token to the client, and so the token can connect directly to Autodesk and use the data, but that's something that you should avoid as well, because if the client have access to the access token, the client can perform operations. So let's say it's a virus or a malicious user, the client can perform operations directly into the data, and if it's a token with write permissions, for instance, the client can also write data directly to Autodesk. So the best way is for your desktop application to send the data to your server. Your server will keep the access token there, just there, and then the server will validate the information and send that to Autodesk. So ideally, your server should be a proxy, if you may say, a proxy in the middle, passing information from Autodesk to the client and from the client to the Autodesk server. So that's the best scenario. Right? Clients, the applications, desktop applications, are a bit tricky in the cloud environment because of the security permissions you have around it. And the last piece is, if you need to do a three-legged authentication on that case, you need to call back. You need the callback implementation. So that's why doing the server-side callback is better, because you can just the server will intercept the callback and send the authorization to the client when ready. So that's why keeping the server in the middle is better. Okay, so moving forward. So that comes to security. That's all about security as well. So as I said, use server-side communication with Autodesk. If you have a web app, if the client, meaning the browser, tries to call Autodesk APIs directly, that may cause a coarse error. That will not happen on BIM 360 Team, but will happen on BIM 360 Docs. So ideally, do not call Autodesk server from the client. If the client's a browser or a desktop application, avoid that, because that's a security risk. And when you're doing that kind of communication, it implies that you have the access token on the client, which is not safe. So maintain the access token on the server. And if you must send the access token to the user, that's the last step here. Use the correct scope for that. So if your application is doing data read and write, the scope with data read and write should be on the server. If you need the viewer to show some models, use the viewables read scope, or even better, use proxy on that. We do have some documentation about how to create proxy on the blog. So just go to the blog. We have samples in Node.js and C# on how to implement a proxy. Or you can just be, you can get the same problem, you can get the same results in security perspective using the viewables read scope. So coming back to the second point here on this list, pay extra attention to data leaks. So as I said, if you're using three-legged tokens, should be better. But in any case, try to avoid downloading some data and then showing that data from your server, because that may be a problem if you don't have a correct user permissions to handle that data. So pay extra attention to that, because that's the data is the important piece. And if you're showing data to the wrong user, that can cause a lot of problems to you and to us, right? Because the data is being exposed to the wrong user. And as I mentioned before, do not store access tokens on the client. And if you must, use the viewables read scope for the viewer only. Do not store like data read or especially data write scopes on the client, because that's a security risk. And if you have a website that is storing that information on a cookie, for instance, make sure to use encrypted cookies. Do not use unencrypted cookies, right? There is an option to do that as well. Moving next. So before we move to the next step, let me see if you have any questions. I don't think I have any questions here, so it'll be fine. Okay, so the next one is how to submit the app on the App Store. That's the actual process on how to do it. Right, so let me move to the next one. Before we go to this page here, let me move and navigate to the store. So the address, if you don't know already, the address to submit the apps is, let me close this. The address to submit to see your apps is under apps.autodesk.com. And when you come into this website, it's going to redirect you to the proper language. So in this case, it's showing me the English version. If you have an app that is running on Portuguese, English, Spanish, French, German, etc., so all those languages are supported. On the bottom, we have the BIM 360 apps. As I'm running on English, even if I select a different language, so let's say I select Portuguese, it's going to show me all the English apps plus the Portuguese apps. So let's say you have like Russian, It's going to show you all the Russian language apps plus the English apps. Come back to English. And well, to submit your app, just click on this icon at the bottom, Autodesk App Store Developers. It's going to ask you to sign in. You need to sign in first. So that's my user and my password. So I can go back to BIM 360 and Autodesk App Developers. So if I click here, it's going to show me some license, right? How to do it. Click on Continue. So here I'm going to submit my app. It's going to ask me for, is it a desktop-based app or a browser-based app, right? You can select both options. So let's say I'm developing a desktop app. I can select the environment, so Windows 32, 64, Linux, Mac OS, and the language. So let's say I'm submitting a web-based app, browser-based app in English. So I click Continue. So here I can type the description of my app, short description, etc., and the other information about this app. So let me go back to my presentation, and I can show you that. Actually, it's moving one step further. So let me, before we go to submit the app, let me come back and show you the publish a corner information. So that's actually the first thing we need to do here. Because as I'm already registered, it didn't redirect me to this page first, but this is the first step we need to do, right? So actually I'm typing my name, email, company, the support email address. Note that this information is for everyone. And here at the payment piece, I'm selecting what type of account I want to get paid for this application, if it's a paid application. So I can use BlueSnap and or actually PayPal. And this is the IPN notification that we're going to explain more later. So just click on this edit button, and it's going to allow you to change that information. So coming back to my slide, just a moment. So as I said, we have payment in PayPal, BlueSnap, which is the recommended way, and there is some steps on how to create the BlueSnap. We're going to talk more about IPN, just give it a moment. And this last one is not download notification. You're going to receive an email when someone downloads or enable your application, right? So for everyone, and you can see the company name, country, name, and email address. Next one is the information about the app. When you're submitting the app, you have the app information, including name, description, short description, and long description. And we have the icons for the app and screenshots and videos. Be sure to include all that information. We have some requirements to the app icon. So use like 100 by 100 pixels on the image. So that's basically it. And the next step when submitting the app is about selecting the login type. So if you require a login to download your app, if it's a free, trial, paid, or subscription. So if you're selecting a paid app, I mean, it's a perpetual license. If you are selecting a subscription, then it can be monthly or annual. Right? And you can also check the compatibility of your app to be compatible with BIM 360 Docs or Team. More will be included on this list on the future, and the categories. We have some categories that we are inheriting from Revit, but you can also suggest new categories if needed. So one more, let's see if I have any questions. It should be okay. So so this is the information showing on the page, right? So this is the information about myself. So if I click on Publish New App, I can accept the agreement and select Browse Based, English, Continue, and I can type my app name, short description. Just to show this, I don't need to type this one here. Let me just select an image here. I hope I have one. I should have one. Branding. So So this is one of my apps. Usage instructions, my email, and continue. Oops, missing the URL. So this is my URL of my app. The next step is to type the required login type. So let's say I want to use Autodesk. It's a try, or I don't have the paid and subscription option here because I don't have the PayPal or BlueSnap set up. So I'm selecting free, BIM 360, the products I want to make compatible, integrations, and that should be mostly it. And I can see a review of my app. I can also see the preview page. So that's how it is going to look on the main page. And finally, I have a page to review, and when it's ready, I can just click on this submit the application. You should take note of this app ID. We're going to use this later, but yeah, that's important as well. Any questions? No questions so far. Okay, so once your application is live, every time someone goes to the store, and let me go to the store here, apps.autodesk.com, and I'm going to BIM 360, selecting the app, and well, I'm logged in, and it's going to show me this open link button. As I'm logged in, it's going to recognize me as the owner. But if someone else is coming to this app, they should see a button to log in if they are not logged in. So if I click the open link or sign in on this page, it's going to send me an email or send me the IPN notification that someone just started using my app. So the email is not really useful because it's just for you to keep reference. But on the development perspective, the IPN is the most important piece. So moving next to IPN. So IPN stands for Instant Payment Notification, meaning that your application will receive a post call from our server indicating that your app was just, someone just bought your app. So the IPN post will include that kind of information. So the app ID, as I mentioned, the type of the app is free or not, the payment, the email that's just bought the app, it is some email, language, OS, we receive all of that information plus a lot of other information. This IPN post endpoint is just one for your company. So if you have like 3, 5, 10 apps, you're going to receive the same post requests on all the apps. So be sure to handle which app is what. And if you have an application that is on the monthly subscription, for instance, you're going to receive this IPN notification every month. So keep record of that on your server to allow access to that. We have a lot of documentation on this. You can scan this QR code. Let me show you on the page as well. So if you come back to that develop apps, there is an instant payment notification format. If you click here, it's going to show you there is a post request. The data is formatted as URL encoded. You receive the app ID, language, OS, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of details in here. And at the bottom, if the application is on the subscription type, you receive the type of payment that just happened. So sign up, cancel, payment, or accepted. So you need to handle those types of subscription on your application. So there is a question, can we submit HTML5 JavaScript apps running on Android or iOS web viewers such as PhoneGap, Cordova app? So I don't think we have a way to submit a mobile app because the mobile app will go on the iOS or Google Play App Store. but where is your app being hosted? So if it's a web app that is running on desktop or mobile, then there is a web address for it. It will be a browser app. But if you have an app that is running natively or as an application on Android, iOS, or Windows Phone, then the application is submitted to the respective app store, not to our app store. So if you can add more information to it. So it really depends on the type of the application. So coming back to IPN, you should handle that on your application to receive new users when the user cancels the subscription or when they pay for the subscription. So the question is, there is the app I see now is integration with cloud storage, Google, etc., etc. Yeah, so yes, so the apps we have now on the App Store are those sample apps. There are integrations between BIM 360 and storages, and the one that exports to Excel. All those sample apps are available on the store and also with the source code. So I'm not sure if there is a question here, but if you can elaborate more. Yes.
Yes, just following in.
Yes, okay, I can see now. So yes, all those apps are available on GitHub. So if you run any of those apps or go to the description of the app, if you click on the documentation help, but also run the app, there is a link to the GitHub on it. So they are all on the same GitHub organization. So github.com/autodesk-forge. And there are two repos on that. They start with BIM 360 App Store, and this is one, and the other one should be BIM 360 App Store Mod Derivative Node.js XLS Exporter. So those are the two apps we have in the App Store, and also with the source code you can get it and expand them. So the next question is, so can we make an app that extends these web services and put them online? Well, you can. I don't know which other thing you're planning to do, but as far as this hackathon is concerned, I mean, on the hackathon approach, right? So your application must be something that you add some value in, and it's not just a copy of what we have. But if you want to make an application that is just expanding those two, yeah, go for it. But as far as this hackathon is concerned, make sure to add some value and really extend it, right? So just not copy whatever you have. Next question is, if extended functionality or modified to perform certain new functionality, we can then post them here for hackathon. Well, I think that's the same, right? Unless someone else wants to jump in and about the rules on it.
Yeah, I think Augusto's mentioned right. So if you can extend the functionality, and this the extended functionality is useful for the BIM 360 users, I think we are fine with that. But it has to add value more than what at present the apps are adding.
Yeah, so those apps are available as sample for you to get started and understand how it works. And if you are expanding, yeah, go for it. So you mentioned Uniclass 2005 app. I don't know which app is that, but we can certainly take a look.
Yeah, but
that's his own app.
you know, basically same functionality, but better UI. That kind of things can be up to. I see in desktop app, same functionality, but providing better ones, and that makes a big difference too. So for instance, instead of 10 clicks, you can do it in 1 click and things like that. Or downloading one file one by one in manual process. If you provide apps that you can do all under your account or something like that, that can be a good one too. Simple but useful will be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So yeah, I hope that answers, but yeah, if not, just post. Or you can also raise your hand and ask with the mic. Well, what about new releases on the App Store? So if it's a web app, there is really nothing that you need to do about that. Just on this new release, just make sure the information on the App Store is up to date. So let's say you have this web application, and you're going to release a new version, a new feature, update on the App Store with the list of features and how to use, and etc., etc. If you have a desktop app that is connecting to BIM 360, when you submit a new version, we're going to review that new version again and post on the App Store with the same app ID. That way the users that downloaded the app will receive a notification about this new release and download the new release. Right? So as I mentioned, we provide on a desktop app, we provide you the installer. So that also address the scenario when you have a new version of the app. Okay, I think that's answered the question. So the next question is, can you show the GitHub sample code to display the app and the key provisioning key in the key provisioning, and what API needs to retrieve that info? So okay, so when you have the BIM 360 app like this one, and I'm showing these steps here, on the sample app, if for instance this app here, I have the www folder, and I have this index file. So if you navigate to this file, there is a modal using Bootstrap that is showing the BIM 360 provisioning, and another modal in Bootstrap showing how the steps, right? So you can, here is the HTML, and the only thing on this HTML that is not hard-coded is the client ID. So I have a input type client ID and an input type with the file name that's actually hard-coded, but the client ID may change, right? So on the server side, right here, in this case, app settings, I have endpoint that is returning this this information. Actually, not here. Sorry, should be on the. No, I think it's here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's endpoint. So if I call my application. If I go to my application and call this endpoint, it should return the force client ID, and we can try this here. So if I just call this endpoint, it should return the force client ID, and the client is showing that information. So that's how it works. It works here. The other piece that you need on this is to show, to test if the application is already provisioned. So the best way to identify if the application is provisioned or not is when you list all the hubs, one of the hubs listed for that user will be a BIM 360 hub, meaning that the hub will start with B dot something. So you can just check for the list of hubs, and if you have at least one hub is starting with B dot on the ID is starting with B dot something, then it means that the application is already provisioned for that user. So I'm checking that with this piece of code right here. I'm navigating to the tree, so when I list the files. So I'm checking when I have the list of hubs, if the type of hub is BIM 360 and the ID starts with B dot, that means that I have a BIM 360 hub. If not, if I don't have a BIM 360 hub, I'm going to show that pop-up screen with the force client ID and secret. So that's basically get the list of hubs, check for the ID. If the list of hubs don't have any hub starting with B dot, that means that we still need to provision the key. Hope that answers. Well, I think we are pretty much it. When you have to submit the app, those are the steps that you need. Next piece is what's coming next, and that's actually very important because this app store that we have today is just our first release. We are planning to expand that app store experience. And if you follow all those steps that we talking about here, you're not going to have problems in the future, like migrating again. But that's something that you need to pay attention, right? So what we are expecting soon, I don't have a date for it, but it should be coming soon, an experience to browse and find the apps inside the product, meaning that you are going to go inside BIM 360 Docs. There will be a apps and integration tab option on the product, and from there you can just browse for the apps and select one app and activate for your account. You're not going to go to the app store outside, find the app, provision the key, etc. It will be much simpler. You're just going to browse the app as a user of BIM 360 Docs. You're just going to browse the app and activate. For you as a developer, you need to pay attention to follow all those rules. And as soon as we have more information on how to activate the app, we're going to provide that information for you. But if you're following all those steps, it should be much easier to allow that integration. Basically, the applications that we run inside the product will be restricted to a specific hub, meaning to a specific account ID. The hub ID is the same as the account ID, right? So it's restricted to that. So that's how it's going to work. So that's the first step. Later, well, in the future, we are planning to do that as well, but we're still looking for feedback on this. We are going to allow the applications to run as an iframe on the BIM 360. So that's one of the ideas we are looking into. That's quite similar to what Facebook is doing with games. So you go to Facebook and select games, and there is a iframe where the game is actually running. So that's basically the same idea. Allow the applications to run as iframes. And the other option we are looking into is to have a new tab on the product where you can allow your application. So let's say BIM 360 Docs, and you want to integrate that with some ERP. And we have the ERP tab where you can just click on ERP, and that will open a complete new product that you can run the integration with your systems, for instance. So that will be something that we're looking in the future. So the best way to get prepared for that is to follow those rules. As I mentioned, do not send tokens to the client, use three-legged, do not expose data. If you follow all those rules, it should be easier for you to migrate. So look at the questions here. So do you need to be concerned where the buckets are created in US or EU? Well, when you have a bucket, it means that you are using two-legged, right? So if you have a two-legged bucket, come on, stop. Every time I click, it's moving to the next window. Let me come back to this first page here. So if you need to be concerned, so if you're using three-legged to access user data, you can return buckets. Sorry, you can return hubs for either US or Europe, and if that's the user information, should be on the right location as the user selected where to place that information. And if you are creating a new bucket on a two-legged environment, meaning that that bucket is restricted to your application, is not under the user account, so you need to control access to it. And to place that on US or Europe, it's really about what kind of offering you are making to your user, right? So if the user is based in Europe, there is a chance that this user needs the data to be in the Europe zone. So ask the user if that's needed, and place the information on the right location. That's important on the compliance level for the user. So make sure you are hosting the user information on the environment they need for compliance with EU or US legal. So yes, that's important. So I think that you have two questions, but within the new episode, I think it's basically the same question, right? So yeah, be sure to host the data at the proper location, either US or Europe. So, well, open for more questions. Those are the basic topics we have for today. So I'm hoping you have more questions, because that's a key piece of the overall process, right? How to submit the apps. Questions, questions, questions. No more questions? So coming back to the list of topics of today, so be sure to create all the requirements, to comply with all the requirements, to comply with the security suggestions we have. Make sure that those you have a very secure app that is not leaking information from one user to the other. Okay, so next question is when is the deadline for submission? So as far as this hackathon is concerned, for the hackathon, of course, if you go to the dev post, there are some rules right here. And the submission deadline is September 30th.
That's correct.
Yes, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So that's the deadline you have. So we will review the submission requirements, security, submitting the app, all the steps we have, handle IPN if you have a paid app. If you don't have a paid app, we really don't need this, but it's good to have that information for you to so have some statistics on the usage. But we're also going to receive emails. And be sure to comply with all those requirements for security. So in the future, when we move from the App Store to in-product experience, you don't have problems migrating your app, or it should not be that difficult. There is another question. Can we submit for feedback and compliance? I'm not sure what you mean, but you can submit your app before that, and our team is going to review your app and check for any problems on it. Or otherwise, you can also post post your questions on forge.help@autodesk.com, and we can take a look and help you manage some of those problems, right? So on the technical side,
I think he meant that he wanted. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify, you can submit the app even today. You don't have to wait till the deadline. We will be processing your apps as soon as you submit. And second point is, if you are working and if you are already started working on an app and let's say deadline reaches, so please submit the app so that you make an entry in the before the deadline and continue to work on the app. So there are two kinds of deadline. One is the submission deadline. Another one is the app need to be published in the store, which means even after submission, if we find any issues, we will definitely request you to correct it and resubmit it. Hence, you have once you submit it before the first deadline, you have another 30 days to refine your app and make sure that the app is live in the store by October 31st. So make sure that you submit the app by 30th of September so that you have a chance to refine the app and make it published by end of the October. I hope that clarifies things.
Yeah, thank you, Vero. Yeah, and then the deadline to have the app live is October 31st. And be sure to do that first. I know that because I did a submission for my apps as well, for those sample apps, and that was an interesting reviewing experience. The App Store team have a big experience reviewing apps for a long time on the App Store as well. So yeah, we're going to look at everything on the app to make sure it's working good. More questions? More questions?
Yeah, just wanted to add some comments. Augusta, thank you very much. Now, recently, like a couple of months ago, I noticed that the BIM 360 Docs has a new feature, which was about downloading a sheet file, meaning that as opposed to document, the sheet ones you upload and download files. This downloading a sheet file was not available until recently, and then this was possible with APIs for a long time. So you can easily, find small but very, very useful features with the API. So, I think that if you are very close to with a customer, for instance, you may find a useful small apps. So just try to look for something which you might think that the customer will very much appreciate. So, yeah, just comments.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there is a lot of good ideas that you can implement. You can start from the samples as a way to understand how the API works, but there is a lot of new ideas that need to be implemented.
Now, another thing, since nobody is asking, excuse me. So there is on the forum side, there is a idea station for BIM 360 as well. Maybe you can browse through and see what the customers are asking. Sometimes the Autodesk is slower than our third-party developers, so you may be able to help our customers.
So the question is, so the submission can be navigational? I don't know what you mean, but do you mean like feedback? Yes, so you can submit an app. We're going to provide you feedback. You're going to you can review the feedback and submit again and keep back and forth until the application is ready. It's not a one-off process. So to review a hidden feature, I don't know what you mean by that, Maron. What do you mean by review a hidden feature? Well, if we're talking about exposing some features that are available only on the API as an application, to reduce the number of steps to get something done, or yes, okay. So if you're talking about exposing some APIs that are possible to do some steps that from the UI are very complicated or hard to do, that can certainly be something that you can implement. So, for instance, this BIM 360 file sharing, you can upload files from the UI. You don't really need this application to upload those files. The benefit of this application is to transfer from one side to the other faster, right? So let's say I have a big file on OneDrive and I want to transfer to BIM 360. Without this application, I need to download the file and then upload again, and I need to do this for each file. With this application, I can just select a bunch of files or a list of folders and transfer the entire thing at once. And I don't need to download and upload again because the transfer is done server side, right? So I don't need to consume my time or bandwidth, internet bandwidth to do it. So that's the big benefit here, is exposing that piece. And or BIM, the other thing is BIM compliance relating to entity classification. I don't know what you mean with that. Maybe, I mean, you can open the microphone and ask your question too if you want.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Unmuted him. So Maran, you can explain.
Hello?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, what I was saying is, you know how in Revit there is this classification, the uniclass or omniclass.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, an API could possibly look at a project in BIM 360 and be able to connect it to a particular classification system like the MBS, for example.
Yeah, well, if you have a file that is hosted on BIM 360, let's say a Revit file, and you want to extract the metadata or the properties on that file and connect that to something else, yeah, that's certainly possible to do. Just make sure that we don't have an API to write back that information, but you can certainly read and generate a report or do some analysis and show the results of that analysis. And yeah, but that would be something to do.
Yeah, I mean, or for example, extract from the Revit file the different elements and then map what they would be from the MBS classification, for example. Mm-hmm. And then later the user could, in Revit, be able to incorporate some of those things when, you know, for the sake of writing or further to compare whether the naming conventions are being adhered to potentially. Yeah,
makes sense. Well, in the future, we are planning to release, we talked about that a few times, release the Revit as part of design automation. And on that time, it should be possible to write back information to a Revit file. But yeah, so let's say you have a Revit file that is hosted on BIM 360 docs, and then you extract all the properties, compare that with some standards or naming conventions, and create a report or create a Excel where the user can download the file, those results, and apply them back to the Revit file. Well, that certainly can be some application. And NBS you mentioned, right, on the UK.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of maybe just something very simple as well that can show some benefit or remove the number of steps of having something done. Where is it that you were mentioning that you could see where clients or end users have been making comments about what they would like to see happen? Is it in the forums?
Yes, I'll show you that. So just on the previous discussion, this is the XLS example. If you sign in, you can select a Revit file and extract that information as a spreadsheet. Right? So that's one way that you can organize data that is available on a model and expose that data in a different way. In this case, a spreadsheet file. So let's say I'm selecting this house design, or this. Yes, can be any file here. Let's hope this works. And if I click on this icon at the bottom, it says export to Excel.
That's
right?
a great example.
Yeah, so it's basically just grabbing all the data and creating a spreadsheet, because the way the data is organized today is like under properties. But if I can organize that as a spreadsheet, that's just easier for some other application to integrate with. So you have all the walls, floors, roofs, etc. So all the information from that model organized in a spreadsheet. But you can also create a different way, right? So let's say you create a PDF or a book report or some report to submit to the city hall. Well, imagination, right? So you just have to look at the standards you have and what kind of information you want to output. About the ID station, if you go to forums.autodesk.com, and should be a way to select the ID station. So come back, let's see, my connection will help me. So if you select browse by product, BIM 360, and glue ideas, so BIM 360 ideas. Well, that's just something that our users are reporting. If you go to top voted, and let's see what we have. So, for instance, this idea here, BIM 360 Field app for iPhones, that's under review. So we are looking into this. And some others we are considering for the future, and accepted, implemented, etc. So yeah, take a look at this for some new ideas. And you can also post your idea and wait for votes if that's something that you want to validate, if the idea is good or not. So just wait to get some feedback from the community before you start implementing it.
Right. And have there been any progress in relationship of doing workflows within, you know, like within docs?
What do you mean by
so
workflow?
that if if you post a file, it could go for approval, for example.
On the product, or yeah, Mikako, do you know anything about that in the future?
Yeah, so yes, I think when the doc started, we started to discuss about it. We had a little bit more like a future type of discussions, and there was some. It's like the stage of conceptual design versus construction to hand over, and those kind of
yes,
permissions. There was in a scope, but I don't see it right now yet. So it's probably on the roadmap, but right now, like issues and those kinds of things in closer near future roadmap. So definitely it's in our head, our Autodesk's product team head, but I don't think it's coming very soon.
And we could do hooks on now files that are existing within the BIM 360.
Yeah, so you can create, you know, workflow ones, and then you are referencing files in docs, or it could be, you know, the bridge, helping a bridge between Teams and docs too, because right now, as you can see, it's separated, and then near future we are trying to, you know, put together. But as of today, there are a lot of Revit users who are using Teams. And the docs has a little more the help with the PDF and things like that, and the plan files. So you may want to, you may be able to help gapping those for the users.
Yes.
Yeah, small annoying things can be helped, I think, for the creative mind. Yeah.
It's a huge I mean, the progress in the last few months has been amazing.
Oh, great. Great to hear.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We have a couple of partners who has integrated the impressive work. For instance, like they took a model from docs and then using like scheduling things, using a viewer. So those are the ones Autodesk want to do it, but it will be far future. So partner is definitely helping us to help our customers. So looking forward for more of those interesting applications to come.
Yeah, there's a gap there.
Yes, yes. And then I don't think, you know, one single product can cover everything. So we definitely need our partners to be close with the customers.
We have another question, Augusto.
Yeah, so it's possible for the custom desktop app or web client to check whether the user is logged into Autodesk desktop app with his/her Autodesk credentials. Can the user grant or deny such access by custom apps? So as of today, if let's say I have an app, I'm a developer, I have an app, and you logged into my app, you as a user logged into my app, I have your access token and refresh token, and I keep refreshing that token and using that token, right? You as a user don't have yet a way to revoke the access token you gave me. We are working into that to revoke that access token. So that's the second piece of your question. The first piece is if I'm logged in as a user on the desktop app, can the application identify that I'm logged in or not? So an application cannot see who is logged in on the Autodesk product except the Autodesk client, Autodesk user ID. So I can see the ID, but not the actual user. So let's say I'm logged in on Revit or AutoCAD. The application can look at that ID and check who's logged in as a way to allow the application to run or not by the Autodesk ID, but cannot get like access token or the same permissions the AutoCAD user has, right? So you can, in summary, if your application is running on top of AutoCAD, in top of Revit, your application can identify the Autodesk ID that is logged in to check for if the application is allowed to run with that user. And so that's on the desktop. On a client, or sorry, on a web application, on a online application where you authorize three-legged authentication. Once the user authorizes, the application can keep refreshing the token, and as of today, we don't have a way for the user to revoke the application access yet.
Yeah, so just adding, this is special for Revit, but in terms of Revit, there is a way, there is an API to check if user is logged in or not within Revit. But unfortunately, the Revit team is not using exactly the same forge authentication at this point. So it's not the same thing. So answer is, specifically with the Revit, it's no, but you can only check if the Revit is logged in. But again, it's not usable from forge side, so you have to log in separately.
So if that's a specific scenario that you want to implement or to test, you can explain more, open the microphone, or post your question later so we can understand it better. The thing is, the BIM 360 apps need to be compatible. They need to be an online application connected to BIM 360, but the application can be a web, a desktop, or a plugin to any of our products, right? So there is a lot of options that we can use here. Oh, we can hear you? Not anymore. Any other questions? Oh, that's basically it then. One more question. Oh, just thanks for the answer. Okay, thanks everyone. If you have any questions, you can post those questions on the Stack Overflow specific to the API. You can submit your question through the forge.help@autodesk.com. If it's really specific to BIM 360, to the hackathon, I mean, submit to the BIM 360 hackathon at autodesk.com, because that's really specific to the hackathon. Or generic questions, just submit the other channels. So one more question, what's going to be part of the issue API? Well, the issue API, as Mikako mentioned yesterday, is not available yet, but as soon as it's available, we are going to allow that on the App Store as well. But I don't think we'll be ready before the hackathon is completed. So
yeah, we are pushing. Yes, we are hoping to have it much earlier, but as far as I'm hearing from the API product manager, Tomer Garon, he said that he's pushing for the before AU.
Yeah. So as soon as I have more information, I'm going to make that on the blog.
Hi, yeah, Jim Kwanzaa here. I just wanted to let that person know, if you know exactly what you want from an issues API, if you know you want, 2-3 endpoints, specific parameters, push-pull, tell us what you want. If you don't know, great, we're talking to other folks, but if you do know, tell us. That'll increase the probability we can give you exactly what you need. Well, and now's a great time. This is one of those things we're working on, and it's coming fast.
Yep, thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone. I think that's it then.